Hello, today is April 9th, 2019. This is the SIG Architecture Conformance Subproject. Uh, we have a decent agenda, and folks, please add details to the end if you want to talk about it. First up on the list for today, I wanted to discuss frequency and duration of this meeting. Currently, we have it scheduled for an hour every week. In my personal opinion, that's probably a lot. Given that SIG architecture itself meets every 2 weeks. I do know that we wanted to get ourselves bootstrapped, so I wanted to pull the folks who are here real quick just to see what their thoughts are.
Yeah, I think every other week works reasonably well for a lot of other similar groups.
Yeah, I agree too.
Has anyone opposed to moving to bi-weekly, where bi means once every other week, not twice a week?
I mean, I think that the original intent to do it weekly, right, was so that we can get people up to speed and then move to bi-weekly later. So I guess if people are up to speed, we can just assume that we can move bi-weekly, right?
Are there any folks who think that they need more context still?
I guess the only question would be, do we want to do it monthly, or is that too infrequent?
I think that's too infrequent, given the fact that people are executing against a backlog, and we want to keep up to speed on burning that sucker down. So,
yeah, let's get enough momentum going, and if in a month or two we see that everything's flowing, it might not even be needed at all, really, right? I mean, it's just about getting things running.
Yep.
Sounds good to me.
All right, so I will talk with Matt, who's on the horn here, about updating consensus is.
I guess my question is, because I can go update the invite, do you want to have it on the same week as the SIG architecture meeting or on the off week as the SIG architecture meeting? Because that is going every other week as well.
I don't really have strong preference. I think same week allows me to write the update because it's Tuesday and Thursday.
Okay, and since the SIG architecture meeting is this week, I'm happy to go update the invite right now and move it to every other week.
Okay.
All right.
Any other last questions, comments, complaints, concerns on that, on Administrivia? Going once, twice, 3 times, sold. So I read through Patrick's PR. Patrick, are you on? I do not see it. Yes, I do.
Yeah, I'm here.
I think it's highly useful to have some minor updates in that PR with regards to like guidance for the rest of the group as we're reviewing.
Yeah, I'm responding to those right now, but unfortunately I didn't have time to get them done before this meeting.
Okay. So I did label this as like high priority because I think people need to know when as they're reviewing it, like kicking the bot to auto test for Windows and using the criteria for evaluation is important for both the reviewers and the approvers. I think John also took a look at this one too. Do you have any other comments too as well, John?
I think this is the one on the Windows list. I did take a look at it. I haven't reviewed it again that was a week or 2 ago. So
yeah. So I think so long as we can get this merged relatively soon, I think that that would help everybody, because then we can, as people start reviewing inbound conformance PRs and approving them, we have a standard workflow for doing, especially for evaluating Windows behavior.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, like I said, take it with a grain of salt. I haven't looked at this for a little while, but since then, I believe we've merged this this image that can be used to create tests that run and succeed on both environments, because like we do for DNS suffix list, it basically provides a command you can run and provide the same output. So the things that need work on Windows, but the method of evaluating them, of checking the test, wasn't working before, we should update that image. Somehow that probably needs to be reflected in documentation that reviewers should be looking for things that can be done in that image rather than say a Linux only test and a Windows only test.
Yep, I agree. This kind of overlaps with a conversation we had late last week. There's a separate subproject for SIG testing called Testing Commons, where John brought up the sheer number of containers that are used as part of the the end-to-end test suite. And it's on the order of, I don't know, was it 30, John?
No, I think it's around like 72 or 73 different images if you have to download the whole tarball.
So it's kind of in a state space of crazy town. I think perhaps as the Testing Commons folks start to dedupe some of this work, we should probably overlap and discuss some of the changes that might affect other cross OS images, because it does not make any sense to have so many images as part of the end-to-end testing suite.
Yeah, it would seem we could combine a number of those into one image that provides a bunch of functionality for testing.
Who's the owner of the cross OS testing image?
I initially wrote the image.
Sorry, I can't see so
Claudio. Yeah.
But I think the one that John is specifically talking about right now is the one for the DNS tests. And so there's still a question of if we want to collapse, those 73 down into a smaller number.
We could actually do that because we have quite a few images under the Kubernetes test images, which have their own binaries, their own Go files over there. We could eventually merge them, since actually most of them actually work on both platforms. I will start with that.
Okay. Feel free. Yeah, as you do PRs, I think anything that touches conformance should still go through conformance. Anything that touches the end-to-end testing infra will probably go through that.
So just to clarify, you would like to actually start collapsing those images, right, into the same image, right?
Ideally, yes. I think that, I don't know if we can have one image to rule them all. I don't think that is an attainable story either. But 73 is insane. So somewhere in the middle between 73 and 1, where it's less than a dozen, is a much more reasonable, tenable thing.
Some of them were like there weren't really any functionality being tested on some of the images, and that just requires a manual audit. But in a lot of cases, it was just a matter of deploy an image and then do an update and make sure the image changed. There was really nothing about the image tested. And there's a whole lot of cases like that.
I could take a look into this and
at least make sure they're all using the same images for that kind of test.
Yeah.
The source code that I pasted in there is supposed to be, the list of images, because that's also where we swap out the registry if someone wants to test on a private cluster, and we can use the same functionality to swap out Windows images. I'll post that in the notes.
Yeah. Currently, I don't think we actually have a. John, do you have a parent issue for this one? I know we talked about it.
No, I haven't created it. I'll do that right after this meeting.
Okay.
At the risk of asking a dumb question, is the intention here? I presume we still want to, not have a bunch of, have a kitchen sink image, but rather have a sort of hierarchy of images where we reuse as many images as possible. So we might end up with, a reasonably large number of images, but the layers will be as small as possible.
Yeah. So my guiding light here, advice would be 73 is too high. 1 is probably not achievable. Somewhere in the range of a dozen seems like a total reasonable number to aim for at the time being.
But I guess my question is different than that. So even 73, where there's a common hierarchy where none of them have duplicate stuff in them, that they're all based on each other, is far preferable to 73 like independent images. Does the question make sense?
You're saying if they all share one common layer that is the bulk of it, then it should still be fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the biggest part. Well, it's 2 parts for me. 1, I'd really like the size to be smaller, which helps anybody who wants to test in an air-gapped consideration. But then also, like if someone's writing a new test, I wish it was simpler to say like, oh, I need an image. Which one of these 73 am I supposed to choose? Do I just spin a wheel? You know, if there's one that's just like default test image, right, that makes it a little bit more clear as well, if they really don't care about the functionality. But
and we should also document the base layers of the test images, so that way it's clear for us who are writing, or for the folks who are writing new tests, when they should use certain images and when they shouldn't use others, because it's not consistent throughout the test suite.
Hi. So we did this earlier for the set of images that we use for conformance. So there is lessons to learn from there, for sure. So one thing wasn't mentioned so far is the manifests. We need to make sure that these are all have manifests, so we can run them across the architecture. So for sure. Then the absolute first thing that we did was do the audit and reduce the number of images by reusing the existing images in places where they are not really needed, like using a specific image, but it's not really needed. You could use one of the base images instead. So do the audit first and try to reduce the number of images that we actually have to touch. That would be the first step, I think. Have we done that already?
No, I think that John, we did the first evaluation to figure out how many, or John did, and I think we need to open up an issue to track the work.
Right. That was the first one we did, and the second thing that we did was we moved the definition of the images to one file, so we could know that like this is the full bucket that we are working with. That made things a lot more easier, because then people could start picking off one by one of the images. The hardest problem you're going to have is getting reviews for the images, because there's very few people who are doing that right now. So you need to make sure that you involve people like Manjunath Kumatag, who has done this before. He's one of the owners and the approvers in the test images directory. So get people, talk to people and make sure that they are in on this. And the other thing would be we really need to get the promotion of the images in place. Otherwise, we're going to have issues, uploading the images, and
this is a broader, like, Google should not really be blocking on this.
Yes. So the good news on that side is we are extremely close. Hopefully, when people come back from Google Next, we'll be able to nail down the promotion process early next week, if not the week after. So that's the good news there.
Are there any more questions about like the?
So when you say promotion process, you're talking about the one that goes from a private GCR repo to the gcr.k8s.io?
Right. So the way we'll set it up is SIG testing will have a GCR repository where some of the owners in SIG testing can push to it. They don't have to be Googlers to push into it.
Okay.
And then we will have another process where a bot picks up this image and pushes it into the official test registry.
Okay. Can you add a link to that to this doc? Because I think we need to get a name on building the Windows images, so that way we can add them to the multi-arc manifest as part of this process. So that way, what we could do is sort of use this as a forcing function to say, when someone's adding a new tag to one of these images, we should have the Windows one follow it.
So the way it is going to work is the first image that gets built needs to have, okay, let me start from the beginning. The GCR repository where SIG testing will push, SIG testing folks will push to, that should be complete. It should have the manifest list and the images for all the architectures. The manifest list should include the images. So basically, the only way to do that is make sure that the scripts that are there for the test images take care of the Windows ones too. We cannot do this post. So right now, if you go look at any of the test images, they build PPC 64LE and AMD and ARM 64. So all three are built. S3, 390, 360, whatever, also. So that is where we need to add the Windows first, if it is not done already.
That's a bit more complicated.
I know,
because
that's why I'm saying, so you need to do that first. We need to figure out that part first. We can't say that we'll get the other images pushed first and then we'll sneak in the Windows images later.
So why don't we do the following here real quick? Let's time box this particular conversation. I'd ideally like to get this first PR for Windows guidance merged soon. Then open up two separate PRs, one of which is the reducing the image count, which John said he would do. But the third is the guidance and the pushing of Windows images and cross OS image construct could happen as a third separate piece. So we have the first one, which is the general guidance on Windows. The second one, which is reduce the overall set count. And the third one, which is, how do we deal with this cross OS image, as well as the ability to push the images into the appropriate location. Does that seem like a reasonable way to strawman to execute against this?
I don't want to say cross OS image because it's not really cross OS image. It's a manifest which has a list of images, one for each architecture.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
That's the way I want to phrase it, because then we are all talking about the same thing. Otherwise, we are not.
Okay. So who wants to take ownership of the first one? I'm already waiting for feedback from Patrick, and I can finish that off. The second one, which is the breaking down of the containers, John said he would do this. Who would like to do the third one, which is both how do we want to say it? The image that is more generic, as well as the pushing into the multi-arch manifest.
Right. So I am willing to help Patrick and Claudio at least show them what we are doing right now. So then we can brainstorm how to update the build process to include Windows also. We might have to come up with some creative ideas here.
So actually, there's actually something I would like to ask first.
We're not going to use this call for it, right? We'll do offline.
Maybe it depends. It might be a good idea to have some other opinion as well. There's one problem. For example, a lot of our images we are basing on a basic box image we build ourselves, which is outside of Kubernetes. So we actually have a couple of images which are not based on anything under the Kubernetes repos. So first of all, what do we do with those? And secondly, how we...
I don't hear anyone.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear you just fine.
I think Dims is having audio issues.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Dims, can you hear me? Okay. So I was saying that we have a couple of images which are outside of the Kubernetes images repository or Kubernetes test images. One of them, and we actually base a lot of our images on it, is the BusyBox image, which we build it ourselves, which also contains a lot of things that reduces the differences between Linux and Windows. For example, we have a symlink to the C:/bin directory, for example, because a lot of tests are executing commands from the bin directory, and so on and so forth. And adding the nc command, which is more in line with how it works on Linux, and so on and so forth. So the question is, what do we do with it? We include that Docker file in the Kubernetes repo as well?
Yes. Everything that Kubernetes needs to rebuild to do anything should be included in the Kubernetes repository. And there are Docker files that are littered all over the repository. for this. But again, I would coordinate it with DIMS on that particular image.
And secondly, in most test images, we actually require a separate Docker file. The behavior is way too different to actually have the same Docker file for both Windows and Linux. In some cases, it's actually a lot longer for Windows to actually have the same thing. For example, for the test web server image, we actually have to install Chocolatey in order to install afterwards PHPD and Apache and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I don't think we need to bike shed on this particular one. I think we can coordinate this one offline and rally around a given issue.
Right.
Okay. But so, as far as I know, you can only have one Docker file per folder.
So let's do this, Patrick and Claudio. Let's get on another call sometime later this week. Please coordinate. And I'll show you what we have right now, and then let's brainstorm there how we can add the new image, or let me look at the links that you have thrown into the doc as well.
Yeah. Right. So please open an issue on the conformance and tag with the conformance label so we can track execution on this, and we can follow up on this as an action item for next time.
Okay.
Right. And as a first thing, we should not aim for all 73 images to work with Windows. We should just limit ourselves to the conformance images first.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I think that was John Schnake, not John Bellemeric there for the 73 images.
It is. Yep, John Schnake.
Schnake. Okay.
So are there any last questions about images? This went far deeper than I thought it was going to go, but it was good. Going once, twice, 3 times. All right. Next one is I did walk through what is the current workflow that I believe Aaron had documented for how the conformance working group works. I'm looking for a volunteer that wants to potentially write some test infra updates for doing project board maintenance. Is there anybody who would like to do that? Basically, when you open up an issue and you label area conformance, ideally what I'd like to do is just add the project if it's not been added to the project already. And there already is a issue trying to do this, but it looks like the lead author of whoever originally wrote this is kind of switched roles. So I think we need somebody to help drive this through to completion.
Sure, I can take it, Srini.
Srini?
Yeah.
Right. Have you pushed test infra PRs before?
Yes, I did.
Okay. All right. Is Brian on or just John?
No, Brian's at next, so it's just me. But, I put a link up there to Brian's original email about priorities. So those 4 bullets at the top are sort of the general overall themes, right? Pluggability, things that might behave differently in different distributions is what it comes down to. So pluggability, things that might have been pulled out or disabled, alternate implementation. So if you look, so those are the things kind of to keep in mind as we go through the backlog or the triage and order the backlog as higher priority than other things. I would also argue that things that are related to the testing infrastructure are relatively high priority because they probably block a number of different issues to proceed. The rest of that email talks about some specific areas that Brian at least wasn't clear whether they're covered or not in the existing tests. And so the top few are sort of this guidance around general areas, but right, the sort of first thing to nail down there is pod spec. Let's make sure that we've got good coverage on pods, the pods API, because obviously that's so central. So that's kind of the guidance from Brian there anyway.
Okay. Why don't we go through a couple prioritizations for a couple of issues and see if we can get a mind meld at the end.
Sorry, about that part spec, do we need a tracking issue that we try to open a tracking issue and then add all the sub items underneath it? Or do we have one, or should I create one? I was thinking about.
I think we have some tracking issues.
I mean, an umbrella issue, what I mean, basically. I open based on Tim's input some umbrella issues.
Right.
I name them as tracking issues. So there is none for pod right now. I can open one. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense if there isn't one.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, there's just generic abilities or capabilities on the pod that probably fall underneath that umbrella.
I'll move all those items under one umbrella issues. That makes more sense for us to track.
Right. Srini, you're up next.
So, Tim, are you saying we'll walk through the prioritizations after we get through the rest of the agenda?
Yeah, we'll go through maybe like one or two, and then we can do the rest offline. We don't need to have everybody else.
Yeah, just to have everybody kind of get a feel for it.
Mm-hmm. So, Srini?
Let's quickly do this. I mean, there are some tests we realize that could be conflicts in the conformance.txt, and I have seen like typically the tags like Linux only, Windows only, tools strips them out. So if the same test name appears under Windows only and Linux only, then they will go into conformance.txt as the same text name. So test name. So that's a problem. Should we fix the tool, or we should have different names for Windows tests, which are basically the same as Linux only tests, or do we run into that at all? Is one of the questions we have.
I didn't follow your description. I'm sorry. I tried to.
Essentially, take an example test from Linux only tests, and we are porting it to Windows. I will have the same test name. Then when we generate the conformance.txt file that has the list of all the conformance tests, we strip out the tags like Linux only tag or Windows only tag. That will cause a test name conflict in the conformance.txt file, which
we shouldn't have a collision. Is this an example of a collision?
Yes.
So if we have if we have a test that covers both, we have two different tests, one for Linux and one for Windows. I think we need to cover the same behavior. I think we should try to combine those into one. And now we have this. If it's an image issue, we have this image that can help us do that. If the behavior is actually different,
then obviously the test name will change.
Exactly.
Okay. So okay.
We don't have a Windows only tag, right? As far as I know, right now we have Linux only. And
yeah, only Linux only.
Feature Windows. Yeah.
There was a discussion some time ago because I added I added the tag Windows only, and no one liked it, so we had to remove it. So the only official one is Linux only.
Right, but from a conformance point of view, right, we want a consistent set of behaviors, and we haven't at least yet figured out how to do that on a per feature basis. Or we haven't gone there yet. We're still trying to catch up on everything else. So I guess what I'm wondering is, are there tests that would only be tested on Windows that are part of conformance? And I think the answer is no right now. Because, those are Windows is an optional feature right now.
So I didn't really understand because there was some noise.
Oh.
There are only a couple of tests which basically have a Windows equivalent. There's a Linux only test and there's a Windows equivalent, but they're not tagged as conformance, the Windows ones.
Okay. Yeah,
they're always untagged. They're only tagged with SIG Windows.
If they're equivalent in their behavior, let's see if we can find a way to combine them and make them part of, if one of them is part of conformance, then they should be combined. But if they're actually behave differently, but they're like,
then I could offer you an example, but there were a lot of discussions regarding a set of tests. For example, the SIG networking, UDP and TCP connection, HTTP connection. Most of the pods created for those tests are using host network.
Yeah.
Set it true. But you cannot use host network on Windows. But those tests would basically pass on Windows without that particular.
Right. So those were problems with the test, right? Maybe as a sort of expedient thing, we just tag them Linux only, but then what we need to do is revisit them and say, are these tests really behaving the way they should?
I could link you the pull requests I have associated with this if you want. And there's always already been a discussion regarding this. I'll have to search it, but I'll paste it in chat.
Okay.
Yeah, basically, we proposed taking that off, and the reviewer shut it down.
Taking off
the host networking requirement, and it was rejected by the reviewers.
Okay, yeah, send me that because I
pasted the link in chat.
Okay.
Pull request.
I am involved in. I remember looking. I kind of remember this coming up in SIG Network, and I looked at it. I'm like, some of these. It seemed like using host network was exactly the wrong thing to be doing, and the test wasn't even testing what it claimed. But I'll look it over. It looks like Casey's in there, and he knows what he's doing. So we'll see. I'll look at it again.
So, yeah, there was also a question like, is the test name used anywhere else? So that's why I added the second bullet point. Are we using test names or any of these tags hard-coded into our CI process like test infra or anywhere? I do not have any visibility on that. So it was a general question I have here. Like, if
the tags are used all over test infra. So there's policy, and if you look throughout the different suites that exist in Prow, tags are exhaustively used. And they're used to filter jobs for given suites that exist. So I would not start creating new tags without guidance from the SIG testing. So like the Windows only tag was shot down because unless it's very explicit that this is a brand new feature that exists only in the Windows domain, that we shouldn't be doing something like this.
We actually have a couple of tests which are Windows only, but they're automatically skipped if the Node OS distro test to the Ginkgo or whatever is not Windows.
Yeah. So the standard operating procedure for adding things that are feature option enabled for any given environment, in this case it would be feature option enabled for Windows, would be feature : whatever the feature is. But if they're core behavior, you should not be using feature : so that's usually like a standard practice. Right, so if you have a Windows only thing that's just a core feature enablement, such as like pods, we'll take an exaggeration, right? That should not be feature : Windows. That should be a core test that is somehow made into the core suite, which has the if provider or if whatever is Windows run on the intersection of it. So there's guidance, there's documentation on all of this actually.
Okay. Another question I had is, in one of the PRs, Brian mentioned that some of these tests needs to be release noted, and I do not see a guideline. Is all the new tests that we are writing now conformance tests or promoting to conformance? Should they be part of the release notes? I thought they will be already part of the conformance document that we generate for each of the releases. So I see that a little bit.
I don't know what release artifacts we are publishing as part of the release notes for conformance. I really don't know the answer to that. And maybe we should follow up with both SIG Release and Brian And we can touch on this in SIGArch later on this week about like what are the release artifacts we want to publish and who owns those release artifacts.
I can add that item to that agenda. But in general, I think it would be a good idea to have a few PRs to generate the release conformance document for each of the releases. So if possible, that should be a link to the release notes.
Yeah, you should probably take it to the SIG release folks first. There's no need to bring it to architecture, right?
Okay.
Right.
Well, the decision about what needs to be release noted is something that is not clear. In one of the PRs, Brian mentioned that all the tests that are added into that release should be release noted, which is kind of like, probably.
Yeah, we could have a section in the release note that says these are the new tests that were added, right? That's probably what he meant.
Yeah, that's all that's really necessary for release notes. But let's sync with Brian and SIG release about what we want to say and how we're going to publish this update and whether or not it makes. Well, I don't know. I don't have strong opinions on this. I'd rather solicit what the broader group of people want to publish as part of a release.
Right. From my point of view, it would be about if I see a test failing, I'll go check the release notes and see if it's a new one. That's about it.
Right.
What it's going to be used for.
Yep.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah. The next item is failed pods limit is some feature that pod spec would have had. I think this is a 2016 thing that Globant ran into. Some of the folks, they were investigating all the features in pod spec. This particular one is not implemented. So it's a functionality that does not exist. So when we uncover this kind of stuff, how do we proceed? I mean,
log the issue, and we'll have to triage it inbound here with discovery and findings, and then report that up.
Sure.
What does priority long-term mean?
Yeah, essentially this PR should go through, and it was LGTM. No, it's not LGTM, but it is put under priority long-term. So
priority long-term means we'll get to it, but it doesn't necessarily have to meet this milestone. So typically things like that are, it's okay to slip. It depends upon how important it is. Jobs. Orphan pods of readoption. I think
it's a conformance promotion. We're not adding a new test, so I did not understand.
Let's just throw the milestone 115 and make sure it gets in.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
DeWall, I think you're up next. We can't hear you, DeWall, if you're talking. It looks like you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Looks like he just dropped, so he's probably going to rejoin in a second. Want to try talking now, DeWall? I hear noise.
Maybe we should go to Brad's first. Come back.
Right. Brad.
Mine's pretty self-explanatory. I did make updates trying to answer a lot of the questions that came up from several of the excellent reviewers. And so if people have a chance to review the new version, much appreciated.
Is it assigned again to Quinton?
I believe yes.
Okay, good. So Quinton takes a whack at it again, and then we go back to Brian with it.
Perfect.
Duval, you want to try one more time? Still can't hear you. Let's take a look, see if we can make sense out of this. Tests that do not have conformance. 72191. The answer was that we still, anything that was like pod related, like pod spec additions, we did want to review within this group, in part because we wanted to make sure that we vetted it and that it would eventually go and become a conformance test if that made sense. I do know that like part of the guidance, and I can tell this as a Globin person, part of the guidance was that we need to fill out the pod spec. And that's what I think Srini said he was going to create a generic umbrella issue. And, you know, we should probably cross-reference that generic umbrella issue with these new ones that are being made. So that way we have a clear understanding of where it came from.
Should we have like some sort of pre-conformance test or something, like something that's intended to become a conformance test eventually? We can sort of track the ones. I would guess it would be yet another column.
I think I don't want to go crazy on project boards. We don't really have that much data. Like we have a couple in review, we have a couple in progress, and we have a bunch that are inbound. But once we actually sort the inbound, most of them are like not. They need to be updated.
Right. Well, I think we'll find though in a lot of those triage ones, there are things where it's like prerequisite things that it's a test that's not yet ready to go through this conformance process, but maybe will eventually, or it's a prerequisite to doing some performance tests. So they're like a different category to me.
They are, but I don't know whether or not that there's enough data to make it worth the distinction.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want another column. I'm just trying to. What I don't want is things to get lost, right? I want to. We either need to tag them conformance and just leave them in triage, or leave them in sorted backlog, or even though they're not yet promotion to conformance. But how do we denote that this test has been looked at, or it's waiting to get enough data around lack of flakiness and whatever to eventually move to conformance, but nobody needs to look at it right now. I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at, but we don't want to lose track of it.
Well, I think as long as it gets triaged appropriately and it's in here and it's in the sorted backlog, then it doesn't matter. So as long as we have coverage and we're just executing against the backlog, I think as long as we prioritize it appropriately, I think that's the key.
Okay.
Give it a lower priority according to other things that are trying to be promoted.
So one thing, like when we are writing new tests, right? I mean, if we can still link them to an umbrella issue, and then they're still not tagged as area conformance because they are new ETE tests. So that
you might get broader adoption, but I think if you want to get them promoted and have better review bandwidth and better review coverage, like we are actually functioning as a sub-project now, so which is good. So we have people who are signed up and who are signing up to do action items. So this is probably a better clearinghouse than most other areas.
Are we talking about my issue? I switched devices. I think you can hear me now.
Yes, we can actually hear you, Dual.
Hey, so this, are we talking about my issue?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this issue had a conformance test and a normal test mixed. I asked the user to separate them because I saw that it's opened in December last year, and people are commenting on both conformance side and the normal test, and it was not going anywhere. I felt that if they split it, at least the something will get merged. So I recommended them to move the conformance section into a different pull request, and so that would help more. And I felt that a lot of tests were doing that. I just wanted to know if there is a pattern that we recommend or if this is okay.
I would always recommend anything that would be the promotion to be its own PR. And that's that promotion step is documented, right? Like it specifically says in the guidance up above of the process of promotion, and that's like you promoting a test to conformance.
Yep, and it wasn't a promotion, but it was existing conformance test that was getting some cosmetic change in description, and so I asked them to just move it because that would go through faster than the test itself.
Yep.
And another one was we wanted to add this test back into the queue. So I wanted to know which queue should I put this in, because maybe this test in the future would get promoted. So we wanted to have more eyes on it. So which queue is better?
We said Srini was going to open a generic umbrella issue for things like pod spec. This specific one, which is a high priority one for us to address, should just reference that issue and still get back on the conformance project board. We'll just prioritize it slightly differently.
Okay, so once the issue is available, maybe you can reach out to me or tag this directly.
I'll ping you.
Okay, thanks.
Right. I think we ran through all of the agenda items. Before we go through a couple of triaging inbound with prioritization, are there other things that we wanted to discuss? Once, twice.
On the project board, couple of items I moved to 75134. It's in needs approval, I think, but it should be in needs approval. And then there is one more which got closed yesterday and got reopened because of.
So 75134 doesn't have LGTM.
Oh, sorry.
In order for you to do that, you should LGTM.
Okay. 75473. Can you please look at that one? 75473. This one is LGTM'd.
Nope.
Should have been. Strange.
I see it here, but I don't see it in the project board.
Too many labels.
Too many labels.
No, that should go into needs approval. Yeah.
So a part of my earlier comment, Srini, was that part of this update for this bot, which is somewhere in my notes back here,
right.
This bot, like a couple of work items was like the auto labeling, but one of the things we could do too is if it's in our project board and it's been marked as LGTM, then if it auto moved to approval in the project board, that would be nice.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, because that would simplify everybody's life.
Yep. I'll probably ping you on what needs to be done there. So.
Okay. So I would say in progress. This is quote unquote sorted backlog, but it's got no prioritization. Some of these things that are currently in progress also have no prioritization. Why don't we take an example of one and try to see if we can, as a group, ascertain prioritization given Brian's kind of coarse grained rubric. Test solve back off test flakiness. Generally, I would say anything that improves testing infra should be higher priority.
Yeah, I think testing infra and this, as well as the pod and the pluggable areas. So
So we only have, like, I actually dislike the current prioritization versus the old ones we had a long time ago. I don't know if it's critical, because critical is usually reserved for stuff is broken. The next one up is important soon. And that seems reasonable to me.
So if we have a sorted backlog and we have priority, I guess this could be an automation to make sure that things near the top of the sorted backlog are the higher priority things. It seems a little bit like two different ways to prioritize.
Yeah, a Kanban that actually does the sorting for you is ideal, right? Because then you'd be able to actually see, like in the ideal world, I'm just a SQL guy, and I like my SQL queries. So if I actually had SQL on GitHub, I'd be a happy person. But I don't have that, so I can't sort automatically with a SQL query. So if there's if somebody wants to take that as an action item to the current list of bot enablement features, I think that would be highly useful. Let's take a look at another one here. And I'm going to stop talking to you. I want to see what other people have to say. This is an issue. This is not a PR, but let's give it some type of prioritization. There are no conformance tests that may be eligible for promotion to conformance. What say you, group? Does this rubric provide you enough information to give you the idea of what the priority of this should be?
So these node conformance tests, if we go back and look at those are largely around kubelet, or what are those around?
So I think there is a one-to-one mapping for many of the prioritizations around prod specs to the E2E tests. So for some of them, it's very clear, at least the ones I reviewed. There may be some that might lay outside the scope of the priorities, but still be good enough for conformance.
I think, yeah, some of these should not, like the privilege escalation, that's definitely not in the space of conformance.
That Etsy looks like a duplicate.
Yeah, there's also termination reason also looks like a duplicate.
Some of these would be Linux only.
I would say because there's such a mixed bag here, I would tend towards long term, like somebody should go through this and sift.
Each of these somebody should go through and decide individual ones, whether they're ready to be promoted, and then prioritize them individually, I guess. It's too big of a blanket.
But we need to give some swag for evaluation because there's other things that are inbound, right?
So most of these tests actually been worked on by Globin folks, so I can have them reply back with which of these tests are already PRs are there for promotion, which are not, and some of them are Linux only tagged. So if that's what you're looking for, I can produce something like that and add it.
That's extra data, but what I'm trying to look for as a group here is a shared understanding of how to evaluate given the information that we kind of have, which is kind of a little limited, to be honest, for us to sort of prioritize the backlog. Because currently we have 41 plus 9 plus, so that's, let's say 51, 60 items that really need to be dealt with in some sorted order, right? We can't just like do them all. That's not a sane, rational way of doing it. We have to assign it some priority for us to bump some things down, deal with them later, and bump some things up and deal with them now.
Well, given the guidance of PodSpec and that some of these are sort of kubelet related and well, they're mostly QL related, and we have things like how the container behaves, how containers behave inside the, I mean, it seems like it's very relevant and probably should be a relatively high priority.
What do other folks think? Other folks? Somebody else?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. All right, let's do one more and then we'll call it a day. This one.
Yeah.
Serial flaky slow test should not be marked conformance.
I thought we dealt with this already.
I think this is done actually.
Yeah. Let's go to the bottom.
So the guidance has been updated to reflect whatever the decision was here.
Oh, there's a couple serial. You said serial too.
Okay.
You said
Flaky and slow we dealt with.
lumped three things together. I don't.
I'm sorry.
Just change the title of Flaky and Slow and we're okay?
Then we have to open one more issue for serial and yeah.
So I don't think serial. I don't think it matters even if serial or slow tests are conformance or not. Flaky definitely should not be. We fix those.
Right. So the another place where I ran into this again was kind testing. Right, when we were trying to do parallelly running the tests, it would fail, and so we had to add the serial. Make the tests run serially. So I think the guidance right now is that all, even in Sonoboy, everything has to run in serial. So
well,
I think
Sonoboy is different though. It's recommended to be serial because you can be running it on prod. But I do think that we should do an audit and probably have an umbrella issue for evaluating parallelization of the tests and to make sure that we are doing our best effort to make tests parallelizable. Because a lot of the serial tests I don't think are necessary. I think they were just bad, not necessarily badly written, but kind of conflating.
Right. So what I would recommend here is close this issue saying that we will not be dealing with serial tests here, and then open another issue that says we need the test suite. We need to figure out a way to run all the things that can run in parallel first, and then run the things in serial or something like that. Run all the things that you can run in parallel first, or do the serial ones first and then do the parallel ones, whatever.
Does that seem fair?
Yep.
Do you want to take an action item for creating that issue?
Yes, I will take an action item for the serial.
All right. We are tentatively out of time. Did folks find this last little bit of exercise useful?
Yep.
So I had this question about flakiness. How do we, is there a time period that a test needs to be running for defined as not flaky?
Time period? No, you usually find out pretty fast. If you promoted something to be part of the standard set of jobs that doesn't overlap with serial or slow, you will know within an order of a day or two whether or not it's flaky.
Okay, so when a new test comes in and they directly want to be conformance, it's always a no, flat no.
With flaky? Yes.
No, and test directly going into conformance is the
You
flat.
have to bake a little while, I think, is what we said the guidance was. Yeah.
That's exactly, the while is what I wanted to understand.
The while is at least one release.
Okay. Makes sense.
So like if we added those new tests that you surfaced today, and they're not conformance tests, but they're a pod edition, then we would wait one release before we promoted.
Makes sense.
All right, we're out of time.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thanks for doing this, Tim.